I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation.
The overall health of Americans has seen a significant decline when compared to 1961, the year that I was born, with chronic conditions like diabetes and obesity reaching unprecedented levels. For example, when I was born in 61, less than 1% of the population had diabetes, and about 31% of adults were considered to be overweight or obese. Now, fast forward to 2024, the numbers are different. These numbers have actually skyrocketed, with 11.6% of Americans diagnosed with diabetes and a whopping 74% either overweight or obese. This dramatic shift reflects lifestyle changes and environmental factors, but it also signals a broader trend in modern healthcare challenges. However, this isn't just a story about declining health. It's also a story of innovation, entrepreneurship, and the power of belief in an idea. Two college buddies took on an idea to make fitness evidence-based and personalized, launched it, and scaled it into a worldwide success. Their unique approach offers valuable insights into how to encourage great ideas, engage others, and implement those ideas on a global scale. Whether it's the example of accessible evidence-based healthcare or launching a successful business, both share a common thread: the courage to trust an idea and the focus to make it happen. Their success story is not just a tale of triumph, but also a beacon of hope, providing what, with the right vision, focus, and determination, it's actually possible to reverse negative trends and significantly improve people's lives, and in this case, fitness outcomes. My next guest is Nick Shaw, and he is the co-founder and CEO of RP Strength. RP has helped millions of individuals across the world get in the best shape of their lives. They are the world's leading experts in hypertrophy training, and their YouTube channel reaches tens of millions of people every month. Nick Shaw on the Leadovation podcast.
Nick, I think it was, Jeff Bezos who once said that every big thing started with a small idea, which when you think about what has happened with that company, those small ideas have turned into huge changes in the way a lot of us shop. You've gone from doing it all yourself to now you've said to me before we started recording this conversation that you've had something like 100 million lifetime revenue with your organization. Tell us your story. How did you start this thing? What was the seed that got it going? And then second part would be, how did you scale it from you doing everything, probably washing toilets and picking up phone calls and managing clients to now, as you say, you're not doing as much as you have. You're sort of working the business versus being in the business. So start off with your story, and then how did you scale it?
Yeah, so I'll try to do the TLDR here, and so we don't go too much in the weeds. But so I started RP Strength with one of my best friends from college. He was a couple years ahead of me. He went on to get his PhD. He's known as Dr. Mike. He's become quite the kind of internet celeb in the fitness space. But we really just started as two coaches, and before that, really as personal trainers in New York City, in Manhattan. And kind of realized we didn't want to do that long term. So he went back to school to get his PhD, and I was still training people in person. And we sort of kept just referring people back and forth because he was working with people online. I was working with people in person. And one day we were just like, hey, why don't we just start a business where we're actually in business together rather than just saying, hey, go work with my friend. And so that was really it. That was our little tiny idea. And if you would have told us back then that we'd be helping literally millions of people around the world, we'd be like, that seems a bit far-fetched. But it really just was that love of fitness early on, and we just wanted to help people. And we thought that this is, let's call it 2011, 2012, something like that. There wasn't this approach to fitness based on evidence back then. And so that was really our big thing. Like we thought we had a little bit better way to do it. My buddy being a PhD, he's the science guy behind everything. We thought that we could systematize things a little bit better. So for example, if you were to hire me to be your nutrition coach, I sort of know what I'm going to do based on how and when you stall out along the way, assuming you're following the program. Of course, that's a big caveat, right? But so we thought to ourselves, okay, well, like we can work with people online. We don't have to do in person. That's one way to scale it. But you're still kind of capped at how many people you can work with yourself, or any one coach can, have, I don't know, 50 people they work with, let's say. So you're still capped. And then in order to scale, you would have to hire on a ton of coaches. So we thought, can we systematize this into a digital product? And so we did like a digital ebook first, and that sold like a couple thousand copies the first week. Light bulb goes off. Oh, there might be something to this. Okay. And which, by the way, we didn't even sell it on our own website. We didn't even have a website at the time. We just like took PayPal payments from people paying us to be their coach. We sold it on a third-party site. So again, didn't really know what we were doing, but thought we could help people. Thought we had some pretty cool stuff. And then once that sort of light bulb went off, we said, hey, how can we scale the one-on-one coaching model? Because we can scale our information. We can just sell an ebook. And that's one thing. But can we systematize this process that sort of has these algorithms in place where, okay, if you do this, then I know I can kind of do this in order to keep you on track. And so we created these diet templates in February 2015 is when we launched them. And they did okay. But about 3 months later, people started sharing their results on social media with them. And that's when they really started to take off. And that was when we saw kind of that like hockey stick. Because if you think about it, what we were offering was a product that you could buy for $100 versus having to pay a coach several $100s a month. So instead of $600, $700, $800, $900 for a 3 month time period, let's say, you could spend $100. And so that really took us to the next level where we could then sell thousands, if not tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands. And kind of in our mind was, all right, so we've kind of proven this concept works and digital products are highly profitable. So we started taking that money, reinvested it back into the company, building out an app on the back end to, here we are in 2024, we have 2 apps. So we have one for nutrition, so our RP Diet Coach app, and then we have one for weight training, which is called the RP Hypertrophy app.
I love it. So it's just interesting that you've been describing this app and taking this content that was used to be developed and designed as an in-person experience to now that's something digital. Even our company is looking to ways in which to do that. I've always wondered, though, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate, and I wanted just to have you come back to me and share with me your experience on it, because there is something intrinsically useful, at least in my belief system, about a live experience. Take, for example, in an environment where companies had to go to Zoom and WebEx during COVID, and we were sequestered in our offices, our bedrooms, and we're holding 8 hours worth of meetings all day, and yet we were efficient. It was cost savings. People didn't have to spend money on gasoline for their cars. Childcare became a thing of the past almost, because we could almost do it all. I mean, it was really a great thing. And yet the downside of all that was that intimate connection with other people. There's only so much we can do through a digital platform. And I guess my question is, do you, in a sense, how do you address the social aspect that going to the gym would provide, or working with a personal trainer? I spent a lot of years in Kempo karate, and I knew that part of the reason why I was going to the mat 3 times or 4 times a week was not just for the physical aspect of it, but the community that we were creating together. It would have been hard pressed to be able to reproduce that in some sort of an app. So how do you respond to the social aspect of fitness, given the fact that you've done really well with the digital platform?
You're totally spot on. And there's a couple things to say on that. And one, I'll clarify a little bit what exactly we do, because I think it ties into marketing. So our target market is people that are, I would say, intermediate or advanced in weight training. We're not for beginners. So, and a lot of times for beginners, we couldn't do what we do very well if it was beginners, because you have to teach some stuff in person. You have to know the right form, for example, something like that. So a lot of times like that, we actually encourage people like, hey, go find a local gym, find a trainer, do some of that stuff in person, learn the basics, learn how to move a little bit. Understand that for 3-6 months or whatever, and then you're probably ready for an app, because what we do is do it yourself. And so you have to already pass that bar of you're already intrinsically motivated, more or less. Because if you're relying on an app to motivate you, that's a slippery slope. So that's where we come in for people that are a bit more serious. And that's actually, it's totally by design, because the target market that we're after, well, I'm a very serious lifter myself. So is my co-founder, Dr. Mike. So it's a vast majority of people that work at our company. And so those are the types of people that we go after, where they're like, you know what? Like, I want to spend my time most efficiently in the gym. Like, I want the best results. I don't want to hop around thinking, I don't know, like so-and-so influencer said, do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no. You're coming to RP because we've got the evidence-based approach. We know exactly how to get you results. RP, we kind of joke that technically stands for Renaissance Periodization, which is a really long name. Never planned on it becoming, I'll say household. I don't mean household name, but in the fitness space. So we just go by RP now, but we kind of jokingly refer to it as results, period. That's what we do. We're the best in the world getting people results and, transforming their physiques. And that requires kind of already this interest in it, not us teaching you the basics, so to speak, although we give so much free information out online on our YouTube channel, for example, that you can just start there and you can learn a ton. And then when you get that baseline understanding, then it's time to come use our apps, because they're definitely not designed for beginners.
So it's interesting. I mean, one, I see two paths here. One is this path for those people who are listening, who are very much interested in their physical fitness, their nutrition, and, more power to you. This is fantastic stuff. I could also see there's some sort of lessons learned about using a digital platform after someone is motivated. So think about a company, think about a team whose maybe their focus is not around physical fitness or nutrition, right? They're doing other things at work. But we're still in the post-COVID conversation, even today, about, do we have everybody back at work? Do we have some sort of a hybrid approach? Do we say come in 2 days? Do we come in 4 days? Do we come in 1 day? Come in and go as you see, please, because the results are what we want you to do or not do? Do we lose our culture because we don't happenstance connect with people over, the water cooler? What is culture these days in a world of a digital opportunity, not only for physical fitness and nutrition, but what is culture when it comes to other social interactions that we have, be it at work, be it at home? What's your take on all that? Because you obviously are doing quite well leveraging a digital platform. How do you philosophically wrap your arms around this movement that seems to be taking shape in many different areas?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I think you're right. It does go back to culture. So we were actually completely remote before COVID. So we were always kind of seeing as like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're all remote? And I was like, well, it's just kind of how we work. So I think that goes back to our particular culture and the types of people that we want. So we're okay with having smaller teams that are probably folks that are a bit more senior that can operate better on their own. So if we were to hire someone at RP, if they need a lot of hand holding and kind of like, over the shoulder guidance and oversight, they're probably not going to do very well at RP. So that's definitely the type of person that we go out and seek when we're trying to recruit and hire. And a lot of that goes back to we recruit. Now, again, we're not some massive Fortune 500 company. Like we're okay with a smaller, leaner team. And that just kind of, I think, all ties into it, because these types of people are kind of self-motivated already. And so they can work remote, because we do just kind of care about results at the end of the day. And, like we've got one engineer, an example, that likes to work crazy hours overnight, and he lives on the West Coast. And we're like, okay, like more power to you. And then we've got a couple people that work around the world, and they kind of know that they have to work maybe a little bit later just to be on sort of U.S. time zones to catch some meetings and calls, and that's a trade-off they're okay with. So I don't know. That's how we approach it. Again, I can only share from my experience, right? Because if I was trying to run some Fortune 500 company, I would probably be thinking quite a bit differently. So that's just kind of my perspective on it.
But it is an interesting topic. It's an interesting hypothesis, that people who are motivated, maybe who have a clear direction and maybe the work doesn't require a ton of collaboration with other people, working remotely, working on a digital platform in your case works very well. And so tell me a little bit, if we go back to more your business and your ability to scale. You started off by saying, I was doing everything. Now I'm doing not as much and the company is growing. It sounds like the vehicle for that expansion was the digitization of your business, those platforms that you talked about. Were there other things that you found were important in terms of your scale? For example, social media. How have you been able to leverage the marketing aspects of a digital tool?
I mean, when you were saying that, the first thing that popped in my head was, the biggest, digital platform we used and leveraged was social media. And so we were probably early in the game in terms of Instagram and fitness. And so for the longest time, like what worked for us was before and after pictures of our clients. People loved them. They were always the most engaged, the most liked posts, the most comments. People would be like, oh my gosh, how do I get started? All that. And then, as things happen, things change. And Instagram was like, hey, you know what? Before and afters, nah, they no longer work. And so we did have to pivot. And the fun thing about, because I used to run our Instagram for the longest time up until a few years ago, is I always just treated it like a game where it's like you're just testing a bunch of stuff. You see what works, and the stuff that works better, you do more of that. The stuff that doesn't work, even if it's some of your favorite stuff, you just do less of it. And so you definitely have to keep that in mind when you're doing social media. You can't go in thinking that, it's only one way to do it. Like there's a lot of testing and tinkering with it. And so like Instagram was great for us for the longest time, and then it kind of stopped. And then when COVID hit, we made a intentional pivot where we had this paywalled content that sort of lived, you had to pay a monthly fee to get in, you could access it. But we thought, you know what, COVID, everyone's going to be at home, especially a lot of people in the fitness, right? Because all gyms were closed, more or less. And so we're like, okay, everyone's going to be at home. People are going to need stuff to do. What can we do? We're like, you know what? This gated content, it's all free now. It's all free. You can come access it at any time. And guess what? Now we're going to start intentionally distributing it onto YouTube. And at the time, we maybe had 30, 40,000 subscribers on YouTube, nothing crazy. But the thing that we have going for us, and again, I'm only sharing my experience, and not everyone will have this exact same experience, is that my co-founder, so Dr. Mike, has what I like to call the gift of the gab. And he is very good at educating people, but infusing humor into it. And so people, they learn a lot from it. And they're like, it's not boring. It's not dry. And that's what you have to have when you're trying to teach people stuff, because people love it. Like, oh, I'm so engaged. This is so interesting. I want to keep coming back. And so like those are the two things that started to line up. We kind of dedicated a lot of our time into YouTube. And so it went from like being really Instagram heavy to, okay, that sort of stopped working. Now we have to pivot into something else. We put a lot of our resources into YouTube. And the interesting thing about YouTube on how they monetize is they pay you to create content. And so we're always incentivized to keep creating more and more content. And then it's just a free way, not even free. They pay us to promote our own products within our content. It's like, it's hard to see how that model is going to lose. And so that's where we've become really big the last few years. And currently right now, we're the number one fitness channel on all of YouTube.
How often do you post?
On YouTube? Essentially every day.
Yeah. You'd have to. Yeah. What's the guideline in terms of how long these posts can be? I mean, I've heard all sorts of things.
So there's a couple different types of content. So longer form content is posted every single day at noon, Monday through Friday. There's a video on Saturday that goes out that's just exclusive to our like sort of premium members. And then there's a bunch of shorts that go up throughout, the week at various times. I don't know the exacts on the timing. Our team sort of figures all that out. But there's a lot of analytics going on behind the scene too. Like we've professionalized our YouTube operation. It used to be a bit more fly by the seat of your pants, but then we really started getting serious about it. We've got a YouTube director. We've got 2 editors under him. And then we have another gentleman that really just creates thumbnails for us. And so there's a lot of A/B testing behind the scenes to see like what's going to work best and all that. And, seeking out tons and tons of different collaborations with other people. And the insights that these folks share has been incredibly valuable as well.
So what's next? What's the 5-year goal?
Okay. Well, I'll do my best to get that. So part of it is maybe not expanding, but really doubling down on the stuff that works really well for us, because I would love to hear your take on this too. But as you start to do better and better, you get more and more opportunities. And it is hard to say no
Mm.
because you're like, well, yeah, I can justify that's a good idea. But then what you really have to do is you really have to start looking at the ROI. Again, this is at least in my experience. And you're like, huh, all right, well, let's say what we have going on is a million or multi-million dollar kind of thing where we can focus. And so, well, this new opportunity is thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Well, how much time should we put into that? And, again, it's hard to say no to people because you're friends with other folks and they have good ideas and they can pitch it. And you're like, yeah, that sounds really exciting. And it's just really hard to say no. And if you can say no more often, you can stay focused on the bigger things. And that has really led us to some pretty serious growth here the last year and a half, is kind of staying disciplined on that. And I found that to be exceptionally hard because I can rationalize all sorts of things in my mind of like, yeah, sure, we should do that. And you're like, but the marginal opportunity cost isn't quite worth it. So it's really, really hard. And I'm literally, I'm saying this, so it's a reminder. I can just, if I say it enough times, I think out loud, it'll kind of sink into my own head. I'll be like, I'll kind of, catch myself when some of those opportunities arise.
Well, I hear you 100%. I kind of have the same sort of curiosity addiction. It's so much so that, we're writing a book right now. And I told this poor gal, I said, I don't envy you because you need to sort of get into my brain and hear all of my ideas and then somehow make it into a shape and a concise message. And like, I've spent 30 years thinking about a book and now we're finally doing it. And it's because of that curiosity obsession that I have. And I do say yes to a lot of things just like you do. But I think that when I think about the best practices that we've been able to help other companies do, we would say, even though we don't always subscribe to it, we're trying to learn from our own mistakes like anybody else, which is to say, really get clear about what's the criteria for saying yes and what's the criteria for saying no. And in really dispassionate, forget relationships and your best friend and your wife's girlfriend and all the other things, or your client that you're so in love with because they've been with you since the day that you started, but just really get out of the relationship piece just for a second and go, what's the criteria for saying yes? What's the criteria for saying no? And I remember, I don't know, it was probably Michael Gerber, I think it was, or one of the marketing gurus many, many years ago was saying that the higher up you go and the more successful you become as a business or as a person in a business, the more you're going to have to say no. You're going to say no more than you're going to say yes. And I coach people all the time on this. Like when you get to a mid-level manager level and they are the high flyers, they are the ones that are being seen as the talent that's going to take over the ELT in a company. They are in a wonderful place, but they're in a very precarious place too, because everybody wants their time. They are known and have a brand around execution and getting things done well. And so what we want to do is load them up and load them up and load them up. And I know of one particular company that we absolutely adore, but there's probably 4 people on the executive team that we would call unicorns because they've been loaded up so much that when you replace that one person, you'll have to find 3 to do their work. And they're kind of like incredible executors, and ability is off the charts. However, it's not sustainable for them, nor is it sustainable for the people who are going to be replacing them. So it goes back to this idea, Nick, that I agree with you 100%, is being able to say no is really strengthens your yeses more than anything.
Well, so I mean, literally, I was having some conversations yesterday with some, a couple of our folks on our exec team, and I was like, what was that quote that someone said? It's either a hell yes or it's a no. And I'm like, man, I got to start, applying that because, I get some opportunities, whatnot, but really, my co-founder, Dr. Mike, has become so well known now in the fitness space that he's just getting bombarded daily. And so to me, it's an exercise in reminding him of like, what are the 1 or 2 things that we can do like world class at? And that's where we got to stay focused, because we can take on, and again, we've done it in the past. I've seen it. I've seen us kind of stall out for a couple of years because we tried to do so many different things. And then when we started getting rid of some of those smaller things and focusing, doubling down back on the couple more things, which are our apps, here we go. We're kind of back on that hockey stick. And it's like, oh, okay, this is how it works. Okay, gotcha. Good reminder.
Yeah, and with your friend, your doctor partner, it seems that the more there's demand, the more you can create scarcity for that demand and therefore say no. Meaning like, so glad that you guys asked for my time, but before I would have given it away. Now it's going to cost you X, or, all of a sudden you can monetize that request, that desire for one's time. And then, of course, that's going to reduce the number of people who have access to you because not everyone's going to want that. But then you digitize everything else to make it more affordable.
Yeah. Actually, I just heard an interesting story, too, from someone I had dinner with last week where I don't know about you, but I get, a handful of, these like spam marketing emails every single day. And so this guy was like, you know what I did? He's like, I just made a Calendly, and in order to get a spot on there, you had to pay $500. And so like all these people that were reaching out, he's like, I just throw them that link, and if they're serious about it, they'll pay for it. And he's like, well, best case, it's something I'm actually interested in. And then they make that money, way back tenfold or whatever. And, if they're not interested or it's not something we want to do, well, I made $500 for that hour. And it's like, that's a really interesting way to go on about it.
That's not a bad idea. And it may not even be you that has to take that call. It could be somebody on your team.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. Idea. And people can scale it too to their own kind of dollar amount. Like, okay, well, maybe it's not 500, maybe it's 250. Or like, maybe it's just even like $100, right? Because you get all these people that want to pitch you, and it's like, well, all right, how serious are you about pitching me? Well, you got to pay at least something, which interestingly enough, I don't want to side tangent here, but this actually does go back to fitness. So we actually changed something in our own pricing structure where for the longest time, our diet app had a 2-week free trial. And it just, I never loved it, but I understood why we were doing it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then at one point I said to myself, you know what? I'm tired of all these people that come in and they're not serious about it. And they'll play with the app for 5 minutes and they quit because fitness is a hard thing. It requires some time, investment, commitment. And I'm like, you know what? Let's get rid of our free trial. You want in, you got to pay us. You got to have some skin in the game right off the bat. And that has turned out to work pretty well for us. Some people will complain about it, but I don't even get upset about that anymore because I say, you know what? That probably means we're on the right track because we want people that are interested in committing to themselves, and the people that do that have some skin in the game. Their chances of following through the program and being more successful goes up. So those are the types of people that we want.
It's fascinating. It's a really interesting. So I've got a really close friend of mine who has this very successful Kempo karate studio out of Phoenix, and he's really world-class facilitator, 7th degree black belt. I mean, and I think he's just a very special individual. And in one hand, I think he loves to see the light bulbs go off. That first initial, oh my God, I have a sense of awareness of myself and my abilities that I never knew that I had. So it's like it takes the novice, and all of a sudden they go to the next level of their self-awareness. And he loves to see that. Where that's a great, wonderful mission. I so appreciate that. And you don't have people necessarily at that high level who are already motivated. You're working at the lower level that's getting to that point, right? So it's almost like if you were to take that model that you just described and create an app around that, it would be, let's focus on those brown belts, those black belts who are already vested, who already have skin in the game, who already know the benefit. And we're going to go from there on up versus from those who are brand new, have never tried to be on a mat before at all. Like somebody who never picked up dumbbells, never picked up weights before. That's a whole different clientele, right? Yeah. And I guess there's all of that can be translated back into motivation on work, whether it be fitness and nutrition or not, and whether you use something digital, Zoom or otherwise. Have you ever connected with the Blue Zone movement and know about what that's all about?
I'm pretty well versed in it. I haven't seen like the Netflix documentary, but there was a period where I sort of read like all the longevity books, and Blue Zones was one of them. So the best that I can kind of describe that, like, is there anything, special about those particular areas? Maybe, but you start looking at all of them, right? What do they all have in common? And what turns to be, at least in my opinion, so there's a couple things that stand out. And I think this is applicable to everyone. So a lot of those blue zones, they're not eating a ton of processed foods, which, okay, great. That's a good way to limit calories because you start getting more processed foods. And what's good about processed foods? Well, good in the sense that they taste delicious because they're manufactured to taste delicious and we want to eat more of them. Makes sense. So you just eat more, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, all that stuff. Wonderful way to go. Absolutely. Gets you eating healthier, and it's really hard to overeat in terms of calories on eating foods like that. So check. A lot of them check that. They're also very active. So what was one was what was it, Sicily or Malta, I believe was one of them, and they're talking about the hills that they have to walk, and
all the streets are going up and down.
Yep. And so you start to look at all this stuff and you're like, okay, so they're not eating a ton of calories because they're eating mostly healthy foods, non-processed, and they're moving a ton. So what are the two biggest things when it comes to controlling your weight? It's calories in, calories out. Okay, well, you're controlling how many calories are coming in, and you're also moving a ton. So you're expending a ton of calories. And it's no mistake why those are blue zones and they typically live longer. Are there probably some more variables in there? Probably, absolutely. Is it maybe a little bit of genetics? Could totally be. Because, sometimes people can do all the right things and genetics would say, hey, you're going to have a heart attack when you're, 50. And that's just unfortunate downside of genetics. Right. But you kind of have to look at the bigger picture. And that would be my biggest takeaways from those.
Yeah. I mean, was it Roger Bannister who broke the world record on the mile and he ended up dying of a heart attack, right? I mean, I think that was the case, or somebody who was in that particular running distinction. So you're right about the genetics. I think the other components of blue zones, I don't have it. I've got a few books on it, but I know that the two things you just mentioned were very much important. Another one was community.
Totally.
Meaning connection. So it kind of goes back to that theme about being with people, being in relationship with people. And they had a lot of different examples of multiple generations all working and living together, having the people, your post person, the person who does your butcher, just having a community sense. And I know that with COVID, it was interesting. That was one of the things that we lost as en masse, was community, and except in smaller pockets. And so in our little community here in my neighborhood, we ended up developing some absolutely lifelong relationships because we had no other option. It was the neighbor next door. And now we travel with them and we love them to pieces. I think the other one of them is purpose, having a life purpose, maybe being really clear about what your direction is, what you're calling. What's your highest and best, and interestingly enough, I think a glass of wine was one of them. Which that there was a
to me that almost ties in.
Not getting drunk, but
that goes into the social part. Well, a lot of people use that as the social element, and so again, if you're using it in moderation, it's the most boring thing to say when it comes to fitness. Like, what are the top tips for fitness? Well, mostly you could say. Most things are fine in moderation as long as you're not going overboard. I could never argue against the two things that you said. I think those would be super, super relevant. And so, when I fast forward in my own life, I don't know, 20, 30 years, I'm like, I don't know if I really want to retire. Like, I would need something to do. Even if I did retire, like, I'm going to find some type of, I don't know, job, real estate investing. I don't know, like something. I need something to do. I can't just, turn it all off, I suppose.
Right. I think retirement is one of those odd kind of words that doesn't resonate with very many people. Retire. Think about the word retire. It's like moving away from versus moving towards something. That's what I think is it's just a transition period of one's life. I know Chip Conley, I got to meet him over at a conference over at Harvard a few weeks ago, and he has a whole philosophy about midlife transitions and how important it is to be able to reestablish your North Star and be mindful of the fact that your body and your age and your spirit is all going through a different transition at that particular time. So, Nick, this is great stuff. I think the common thing that I'm hearing here is, whether people are listening to this podcast going, hey, I'm really into fitness or I'm not, certainly the common denominator is energy and that life force. And if we don't have that, we're not going to be moving forward in any domain. I know there was an interesting book that I read a while back called The Powerful Engagement. And one, you would think it was a time management book, which really not. It's a book about energy. It's a book about how to increase and keep your energy high, because the idea is that when your energy is high, you're going to get a lot more done. You're going to be a lot more healthy, and you're going to be a lot more productive. Now, of course, the right kind of energy, you can be frenetically energetic. You can be worried energetic.
Yeah.
Those are probably the negative forces of energy, but the positive forces of energy. And I could see that, you're in the business of energy in some ways. You're in the business of being able to uplift that natural human energy that we all need and we all have to have in order to be successful.
Yeah, a real quick note on the energy front. And if you've ever dieted before, you might have noticed that like energy levels do start to go down a little bit. And something that I've picked up on, and I try to remind myself, like I recently this past weekend was a little under the weather. I got back from traveling, and I don't get sick very often, but I was definitely a little under the weather. And so what happened was I just found myself laying around more often, and I find that the more I do that, the less energy that I have. And so it's like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing where then I don't really want to do anything.
Yes.
And then like I continue to not want to do stuff. Whereas a lot of times if you can just, and this is for folks that maybe aren't super into fitness yet, but some people think that you're always motivated, and that's absolutely not the case. Sometimes you just got to take those first couple steps to get moving and get some of that energy going, and then it becomes easier. But it's like usually that first step is the hardest one, and then once you get a little momentum, it starts to get a little bit easier. And I think the same principles apply a lot to business. If you wanted to start something, it's like it's really hard to get started, but then once you do get moving in the right direction, get a little bit of momentum, things can get a little bit easier. So hopefully there's a lesson there for people that are listening, whether you want to get started in fitness or business.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that the going back to this idea about energy is it's so important to know that there is the exertion of energy that takes place. I mean, if you take the metaphor and the reality of weightlifting, that's an exertion of energy. But there's also the other part, which is the repair. It's the rest. It's the recoiling. It's the nurturance of all that. And I go back to this book again, which he was studying the difference between how business in our Western cultures addresses productivity and how professional sports addresses productivity. And they're very different systems, and they're very different approaches to energy management. The latter, the professional sports people, are all about understanding energy management and knowing the importance of rest and relaxation. You don't see a baseball player throwing 9 innings every game, right? We have time to put our arm in a sling with ice and take a nap and whatever. But at work, we sort of hold up as the examples of great leaders as those that in effect do that day in and day out. And we greet each other with, well, how are you today, Nick? Well, I'm really busy. That's the way we orient ourselves, is around overextending our energy versus valuing the repair. And we give back billions of dollars in the United States to our companies by not using the vacations that we've been granted. It's just an amazing thing. So I think your point's really well taken, is that it's about energy management, and part of it's about knowing when to rest.
100%. It's this weird thing. Sorry, this will be the last point here to kind of wrap up on. It's super important because I literally had this conversation yesterday of, it's okay to do like one or two, maybe like big things for the day and not have your calendar completely filled to the brim, because you do actually need some downtime in between. And like, if you're doing the right things and you're focusing on the couple main things that are moving the needle, you don't necessarily have to have your calendar filled with, meetings every 30 minutes and all this stuff. It's like, you can just do a couple things and then you've got, time to rest in between. It's the whole idea of like deep work, and you can't deep work 16 hours a day. That's not happening. You might get 4 hours out of the day with that. Yeah. And if you use those 4 hours wisely, man, you've got a full day's worth of work right there.
Yeah, there was, I don't know, again, another reference I was just thinking about as you were talking, Nick, was, I think it was, Daniel Pink, I think, did some research. He's really big into motivation, but he had another book that was talking about, I think, essentially biorhythms. Essentially, that 80% of the population will find their best work when it comes to highly cognitive in the morning. And then somewhere around noon, it drops off to be more rote, sort of things that don't require a tremendous amount of mental focus, things that are easy to do, but needed to be done. And then in the afternoon, evening, we get another surge of energy that's not so much about mental cognition, but it's more about vision. And that was what the studies were talking about. And I thought, well, that kind of fits at least me. I can sort of almost plan that, 3:30 in the afternoon, depending on how the day went, my energy is not going to be as high as it was at 9 o'clock in the morning. So you can almost schedule your life around how your energy flow naturally happens.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Nick, it's been great to get to know you. Great conversation. Finish up with how can people connect with you, follow you, know more about what you're about?
So I think the best spot is go to YouTube and search Renaissance Periodization. I know it's a bit of a mouthful there. If you just search Dr. Mike, anything related to fitness is probably going to come up, and you'll recognize my buddy's got a fairly large head. He's bald. And I will say he's very colorful. We'll use lots of colorful language. And for the vast majority of people, that is insanely appreciated. They like the humor. I will just throw that caveat in case someone goes there for the first time and it's like, whoa, I didn't expect some of this. It makes it very lighthearted and funny to do that. So yeah, our YouTube channel is absolutely a great spot. And then if you'd like to connect with me personally, Instagram at nick.shaw.rp is the best spot for that.
Fantastic. Well, it's been great to chat with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newlund. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.